Our main speaker today is kind of hard to describe how famous and how influential he's been in the history of our city. And if you missed it, you got to check this out. Full-page article about him in the Chronicle yesterday. Ray told me before the meeting that some of his friends called the Houston Chronicle the Ray Hill newsletter. But I love the opening paragraph because it says Ray Hill has spent time in prison, hosted groundbreaking radio shows, and served as secretary for the local NAACP chapter. He is a well-known Houston activist, a rabble-rouser, and a scrappy charmer. And Ray says, I help all of those I can, and I comfort all of those I can't, which I think is a beautiful life model. Let's give a warm welcome back to Houston Waste to our friend Ray.
Thank you, Mike, for that generous introduction. Thank you, TC and Steve and Verena for that setup. That you got the table well set for me. That Chronicle article is mostly about my gay stuff, and there's a lot of that, but I'm not here to talk about that today. There are other stuff, but I'm here to talk about the weather. You got up this morning and it was cooler than it has been, and it was clearer, and the air was cleaner than it has been. And it reminded me on my drive over here that what really sustains us all is nature. I mean, that's reality. And she is in a struggle with our natures. She's in struggle with our greed, our selfishness, our short-sightedness. And she's putting up a heroic fight, and this morning reminds us that she may have what it takes to ultimately win. All we need to do is at this late stage of the game is pitch in and help. And that's a pretty good metaphor for our governance. We live in a democratic society. We will all vote in a month or so. We'll go to the polls and we'll cast a ballot. And our governance is in a struggle against our baser urges and our baser nature, driven by greed, selfishness, short-sightedness, and add the word of revenge, and then you can get to the topic of criminal justice. Criminal justice is a system that we don't think a lot about. We're in a land that calls itself the home of the free and the land of the brave, yet we are so afraid that we're the most incarcerating nation on the planet. We have about 5% of the world's population. We have well over 25% of the people locked in prisons among all of the total nations in the world. Doesn't sound like a lot of courage to me. And how did we get to this point? The criminal justice system, as we understand it, is a system whereby we put a fine gloss on who we decide can live or die, executions. I covered an execution earlier last week on KPFT. I do a show when everyone else is trying to avoid thinking about somebody getting killed. I do a show when that actually happens on the radio, so that at least my listeners have to live with that reality. And we're a system that puts a gloss on who gets locked up and who doesn't. Locked up. Locked up. All incarceration comes from the basic theory of running out of town. All exclusion. You can't live here anymore. In Socrates' days, which was kind of a rumored beginning of democratic society, they had a way to vote people out of town. Socrates got voted off of the island. He didn't like that. The theory worked is that if you were run out of where there is organized society, you entered what is known as chaos. Now, Socrates, being a man of considerable local knowledge at the time, could have gone to Syracuse or to maybe even Sparta, although he didn't like that idea. He could have gone to Thespos and become an actor, or he could have gone to Lesbos and become something else. But the deal is being run out of Athens was so egregious to him that he chose to drink the hemlock rather than just leave town. So if our idea of criminal justice grows from the idea of excluding people from our number, when we run out of places with chaos, we built them within our cities and our states, and they're called prisons, and they are indeed places of chaos. Trust me, I was sentenced to 160 years in the Texas penitentiary and actually served a little less than 5 years in Texas prison system, so I know what I am talking about. Why do we do that so often? Because we think that helps. And in the field of criminal justice, if something doesn't work, it only logically follows to assume that doing more of it will work better. I went to a place called Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to do a one-man show called Ray Hill, The Prison Years, and I did it inside that institution. That is important because that is the first modern prison on the planet. It was built by the Quakers, the gentle Quakers. Gave us what was then named the Walnut Street Jail, G-A-O-L, Old English spelling. That became Eastern State Penitentiary. It's still there. It's a museum. And its crumbling nature is a fine metaphor of our criminal justice system because of its age and its weight and its unwillingness to reform. It becomes a crumbling entity. You go in there and you look around and you see scary things like stone walls and iron bars and places. The Quakers thought, well, if we built a place where people could go and be isolated so they would contemplate the evil of their ways, they would inform. That works well on Quakers because it's in their culture, but you send a Baptist in there and he just goes crazy from sensory deprivation. Baptists don't know what to do with sensory deprivations. Quakers apparently have a better formula for that. But the idea is that it did not work. And so every state in the United States and all of its provinces and the other nations of the world said, hey, what a wonderful idea. This is a great thing that does not work, and we're going to do it too. And they did. So we become the role model for incarceration. There is that wonderful statement from the Quakers who in 1997 toured the country and examined prisons all over to find out what happened to our idea about prisons. You know, the Quakers, strangely, have some sense of responsibility. And during the G4 event in Houston, where all these people came and talked about big money, we had an alternative conference to that. The Quaker speaker was a young black man, and he read from the report that prisons cannot be justified because they destroy the spirits of the people we send there and do severe damage to the character of people who work there. And that is the nature of power and the influence of power. Well, here we are in 2016. What the hell do we do about it at this point? About 4 years ago, a group of friends of mine, a bunch of drunks and ex-convicts, got together. Well, pulled up drunks. We meet at AA meetings and then have another meeting afterwards. I've got a 57-year chip in my pocket if you want to know how long I've been sober and drug-free. We started an organization called En Masse Incarceration. It wasn't because we were worried about the people that were wrongfully incarcerated, because certainly none of us were. We all did the crimes for which we were punished. But we noticed that we could have gotten worse in those institutions, those universities of crime. We hoped that we'd gotten better, and we hoped we could make some contributions. And so I have some connections with the American Law Institute, and through them I got connections to a fellow by the name of Eric Holder. You may have heard of him. He was a former attorney general. He called to me and said, all right, I get the idea. I know what you want to do. What the hell can I do? And I said, you can take the weight marker of a federal drug indictments. Just take the weight marker off. What the hell would that do? Well, all mandatory minimum sentences based on drug convictions come from the marker you put on every indictment about how much drugs was involved. So if it's got one bag of dope on a federal reservations, that's a minimum sentence of possible maximum 2 years, probably probation. If you've got 40 pounds of dope, that is probably about 5 years. You're going to have to do some time on that. I'm going to give you probation. If you've got 40 pounds of dope on an interstate transportation thing, that's 15 years. Mandatory minimum, the judge cannot do less than that. And if you've got 1,000 pounds of dope, that's a life sentence. And I said, who you're locking up are not people in the dope business. Who you're locking up are people who are mules. People who are actually in the dope business are not going to get caught carrying 400 pounds of dope. They're going to pay some truck driver $600 to drive a pickup from Harlingen to Corpus Christi, and he's going to get busted and get a life sentence or 15 years anyway. So you're sending the wrong people to prison. You're sending the people at the bottom to time that you think you're giving to people at the top, and that's just a myth you have, Mr. Attorney General. So Eric went to the American Bar Association, said, I'm taking the drug marker, the weight marker of all drug indictments. Hundreds and thousands of people have not gone to prison for a long period of time because of that reform. President Obama just last Tuesday announced clemency for another 102 inmates in the federal penitentiary who were sentenced before the reform, and now during his term he will give clemency to at least 667 federal prison occupants for the reforms that we began with that conversation with Eric Holder. I'm just a queer ex-convict who lives on Social Security, disability, food stamps. I live below the poverty line. And there you sit saying, well, I'll make a difference as soon as I get another college degree. I don't have a college degree. I have a release document from the Texas prison system. There you sit saying, well, when I get some more money or when I get some more backing, no. That's not the way to look at this. The way to look at this is what needs to be done. Where you are, as you are, exactly who you are, belly up to the bar and make it happen. Change is not something that will show up on the ballot for the presidential race. Change begins when you get a few friends together, drink some coffee, and says, let's go to work. If I have one message in my life, it is for you to heed to that. The criminal justice system in this country is changing. In a decade, we will have fewer than 1/3 of the people we now have locked up. And as one director of prison said, well, all my convicts, 20% of them I need to keep, the rest of them I can turn loose tomorrow with no danger to the public. But you're talking about guards that will no longer have jobs, and they'll also be released in the public, and that's a real danger. Thank you, Pro Procunier, former director of Texas Prison, for giving me that line. My name is Ray Hill. I will be 76 years old next week. And there's nothing that has happened in the city to advance civil rights, human equality, women's rights, health care for the people that everybody else wanted to run away from. That doesn't have my fingerprints all over it. I'm just asking you to do your part.
Thanks so much, Ray. We do have time for a little bit of Q&A. Now, unfortunately, our wireless mic is not here today, so I guess what I'd like, so I'll call on you and maybe repeat the question so that it makes sense on our podcast and so forth. Where Ray can if you can just repeat the question, that would be great.
Sure.
And I'll just let Ray call on people, but let's just a reminder, please make this a question time, not a comment time, because we're here to hear from Ray this morning. So ask a brief question, but please no soliloquies. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Early in your talk, you made a comment about the system that does not work. And
Yep.
I just wonder, I was waiting for you to define works or does not
The
work.
question is, I defined the system as a system that does not work, and therefore, if it does not work in criminal justice, more of it will work better, is I think my exact phrase. Well, the fact of the matter is that the Eastern State Penitentiary did not, in fact, change the behavior of a large number of people. Not of Quakers, nor of Baptists, nor whoever else they had to cope with in the 1820s. The recidivism rate was very high, and that has remained very high now. People we send to prison, you send a person to prison for the first time. When they get out, there's about a 70% chance within 5 years of their returning to prison. When they go to prison the second time, there's then about an 80% chance for them to return a third time, and if they go a third time, you can count on them staying in prison until they get too old to do whatever it is they do to go to prison. So the prisons do not work in terms of producing productive citizens. Now, a handful of us out there are trying to role model differently. And that's what the prison show is all about, and what my constantly meeting with former inmates is about giving role models for people not to follow that behavior. Does that help? Yes, sir.
Two quick questions. First on, what causes mass incarceration and being smart as opposed to being stupid on crime. In the country, there's been a lot of talk about marijuana reform policy, and that's spreading from state to state. Question on that, your thoughts on just legalizing all drugs, not just marijuana, just treat it like we treat alcohol, adults 21 and over, get it out of the black market.
Portugal and Norway, good examples on the ground of where they just simply remove the Okay, the question is, what do I think about legalizing all drugs? He was going to give me an edge. He gave me a little beachhead of marijuana. I could talk about that, but he went straight to the nucleus of that. And the nucleus of that, there are two examples. Currently, Portugal has fewer drug problems than anybody else in the world, and that's because they have completely removed criminal sanctions against drug use and distribution. They treat it as a medical model, as opposed to that, and they tax people who make too much money at the distribution end of it. And they're very good about those taxes. Instead of locking people up for the taxes they don't pay, they put them to mandatory work on the free world and make them pay those taxes, which is probably, I know, when somebody breaks into your car and steals your radio and your CDs, or breaks in your house and steals your television, your DVDs, you won't do something they ask. I understand that. That doesn't make sense. Oh my God, I've been raped. That's true. That's why the Romans decided that all violations of the laws were against the state and not against the individual, because Hammurabi's Code, which says an eye for an eye, which was written as a bleeding heart liberal movement of its day, because you lose an eye, somebody else lost their whole head as a result of revenge for that. So he is trying to limit things to limit things. The deal is that none of these revenge-based efforts give us as society anything. There are a whole lot of people out there that need to slow their fast lifestyle down and get some education. But let me tell you, a mother has nobody to call until her son or daughter is either in the jail, in the emergency room, or heaven forbid, in the morgue. We need to help mothers. They see this coming. If we put the same amount of energy, I was just talking to the police chief this week, and to the warden of the Harris County Jail, Steve Smith, is a great Greek friend of mine, old detective. I love him to death. He and I don't agree on anything but Greek food. And I was talking to them. The amount of energy we're fixing to put into the joint booking facility for Harris County and Houston City Jail, and I want you to know, I've worked on that for about 8 years. And it's a reality, it's going to happen. Both Mayor Parker and the county judge have come to an agreement with the sheriff, and it's going to happen. But the amount of energy we put into that, if we put the same amount of energy to answering calls from others who say, my son's headed in the wrong direction, boy, we'd had a lot of this off. Yes. Melton.
If incarceration, as we're doing it now, doesn't work, do you have any idea what we could do with the person who commits a crime other than incarceration?
Well, can I, okay, the question is, if incarceration is not working, what do you do with people who commit a crime? There's wonderful examples in Norway and in Sweden that when somebody commits assault, the first thing they see is a life manager. All right? You violated the law, we've caught you, we got you dead to rights. What's going on with you that's causing this? And it begins with prevention. It begins with prevention. It doesn't begin with revenge, as here. It begins with prevention. And we could prevent a lot of crimes by understanding if somebody is a danger to you. Let's put them somewhere so they can't get to you until that passes. But while they're there, let's find out why they hate you. And see if we can put a little balm of Gilead on that. And save that in that process. That's really cheaper. It's cost $34,000 a year per prison bed in this country. 34. We could bribe them with half of that and get them to behave. Say, all right, here's your check. It's becoming every month. Now mind your own manners. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you could speak to what, if anything, is being done to counter the massive amounts of lobbying money coming from the private prison industry, whose business model is dependent on increasing incarceration.
He asked about what do I do about lobbying money. Listen, if you can find the tap on that spigot, call me. All right. I mean, if I sold gravel to cities and counties, the first thing I would do with the first check I got from the gravel is hire 2 lobbyists to go to the city and the county and figure out ways they need more gravel. That's that greed thing I started talking about when I was worried about the weather. And let me tell you, it has become so insidious that it is even embarrassing to some of the original investors into the private prison. But the Koch brothers are backing off of private prisons because they don't want to have the reputation of locking people up for profit. You know, let me say something about that. In the colonial days, if you did something wrong, they put you in the stocks, you know, and stuck your head through the boards and hands. You were out there for your friends to come by and say, you're stupid. That works politically, except for running for president right now. But chagrin, embarrassment, worried about what your peers think about you. We need to bring more of that. It's cheaper. And it's so easy to do when you can manipulate the media like I can. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Let's do one more and then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
Okay, give me your name first.
Matt,
Matt. Okay, Matt, you're on.
what would you say is the role of increasing mental health care in lowering, recidivism rates and that kind of thing in the prison system? Or does that play a role at all?
Oh my God. The question is, what role does mental health care play in this overall picture? What Steve Smith and I eat Greek food and talk about is what to do about his mental health population. Because, I mean, he can get one more bed and it's time for celebration. Call Ray, let's go have lunch. Let me tell you about the new mental health bed I've got in Harris County Jail. And that's true because mental health plays in all of this. There's this wonderful book out. I hope you will take time to read it. It's called The New Jim Crow. It's by Michelle Alexander. And in it, Michelle explains that we dump onto the cops all of those issues that we don't want to deal with. And mental health is number one among them. If somebody's acting, as the police say, hinky, the neighbors don't want them there, first thing you do is lock them up. Wrong place to send them. That's why that joint booking facility is going to weed those people out from everybody else before they go to jail. And that's, I mean, when you're dealing with criminal justice reform, you got to juggle all these coconuts. And I've been at it longer than most people. But I want you, before you leave, I want you all to appreciate the dance club where we've been meeting for a while. I want to thank Mike August for holding all this, Mike Oss for holding all this together. I want to thank the participants that it takes to help him do that. And I enjoy coming talk to you. I hope I'll come talk to you. He told me that the next time I come to speak, he wanted me to bring my dildos. So,
Yeah.
so when you see that plug, come see that.